Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning into the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are at Everett High School in Everett, Washington, just because we thought this would be a cool place to start this interview with somebody very interesting who I'm going to introduce you to. A few years ago, I was at a car show and a guy approached me and told me about a small but very eclectic collection of cars and stuff that he has, and really interesting guy. I stayed in touch with him. The time just kind of ended up being right. I called Barry Hilbert and said, let's do an episode. So Barry, come on in here. How you doing?
Hi Lance, good to see you again.
Thank you so much for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show.
Oh, my pleasure.
I was really impressed when I met you with how knowledgeable you are, and in the best sense of the way. You are peculiar like me in that you like some kind of unusual cars, and the passion that you have for automobiles is just effervescent.
I get accused of living in the past, but I love the time frame of the cars I've collected. They meant so much to me when I was in high school, and I can't believe I found them. You know, it's just...
You say high school, how did it start? Was it then, or were you a little kid pushing cars around in the dirt and it just grew from there?
I did that too. I had the little model AMT cars, and I'd push those around. And I remember the first car that impressed me, we were driving 1951 in San Antonio, and a 50 Nash came at us. And I said, Dad, what's that? And that's the first car, and an unusual car, that caught my interest. But as the 50s evolved and up to 59, I was about 15 years old. And the cars of that time frame just seemed to come together. It was the ultimate, the 50s styling, the colors, they were new every year. And I more or less have left my heart in 1959, and that's what I was looking for when I started looking for the cars.
And your collection screams of the 50s. I mean, it is the most 50s collection you can have. It's great.
Well, supposedly this is a hobby for rich men, but I just had the desire to save these. And gradually, through the help of some friends, and we just have brought them back, and it's so nice to still have them now.
And you talk about rich men. People have asked me about cars that I love. If you put a $6 million Duesenberg in front of me, I'm really going to appreciate it, and I'm going to spend a good 10 to 15 minutes looking at it. If you put that 50 Nash in front of me, I'm going to spend a half a day looking at it, because that really lights the passion. A car that lights the passion also, I used to own a 60 Thunderbird. You have a 59
That's right,
here.
You said you had a 60.
This is very nice, and it's a convertible. So tell us about this car.
Well, this one, I couldn't believe I found this one in this color. My favorite TV show in '59, and it was a top show on the air, was 77 Sunset Strip with Aunt Cookie Burns. And Efren Zimbalist Jr. drove one just like this color scheme. And I was at an apartment in South Everett where I lived in the mid-'70s, and two girls drove up in this car, and I couldn't believe it. And I walked over and I said, this is just what I've always wanted. And they said, oh, this? It's Dad's car. He thinks it's neat. And they didn't even want to be seen in it. And of course I had to meet him. He lived about a mile away. About a year and a half or so later, I was able to buy the car for a whopping $1,500.
I know that the public back then, and people are still saying it, they got really mad at Ford when they went from a two-seater to a four-seater. However, their sales doubled, so they knew what they were doing.
Well, that was a gentleman who just passed away, and he's known more for his Vietnam era time frame, and that's Robert McNamara. Right. He came into Ford and he was all business. And he said the little bird is cute, but it's not a good business proposition. And they came up with this, and they built this car and the other car I have in the brand new Wixom plant. And they built the plant just so they could make the unibodies that these were made of. And they had never done this before. It was a personal four-seater, a console, very low, and it broke all sorts of rules and molds. It had a cross-flow radiator. They'd never tried that before. And in '58, they had a big recession that was short-lived, and this was the only success. This car, they had overtime going on these, and they couldn't build them fast enough.
One of the stories that I've heard that makes sense is these are somewhat rare because in the demolition derby community, because of the unibody and plus all the sculpting, which gave them extra
body strength.
These were very popular in demolition derby, so a lot of them met their demise in that.
I remember one at a wrecking yard back in the '70s. It looked as nice as this, and there it was sitting in the wrecking yard just because of, what, a transmission probably or something. made you sick. I couldn't save everything.
Well, speaking of the transmission, what do you have for running gear in this? Which
Well,
motor do you have?
This came pretty much one way. You got the 352 V8 with the Cruise-O-Matic 3-speed. And the first year it came out in '58, it had coil springs in the back because they were thinking of doing air suspension, but they didn't. So this has leaf springs. The interesting option you could get on this, and very few people ordered it, is you could get the Lincoln 430 cubic inch engine in it with the Cruise-O-Matic. And this speedometer goes to 140, and there's a collector who claims you can hold this at 140 with that 430.
But you haven't
Lincoln.
tested that?
No. Too many bugs crushing all over the front of the car.
One of the things that I think is so special about, I'd say definitely starting with 58, well maybe even 55, but especially 58 because of the back seat, on into the mid to late 60s, is the interiors on Thunderbirds are so gorgeous and so unique and so classy and so sporty all at the same time.
They were the first to pioneer the seating arrangement. The console and the high door sills were what made the car strong because it's a unibody. And to lower it, they had to encroach on those areas. So the console was a new idea, the personal seating, and later in the mid-60s, they had that lounge seating in the back.
Right,
It looked like
big
a
couch.
big couch. And overhead consoles came in later on with the controls.
The back seat looked like a booth at Dino's that you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then the dashboard on these, a little bit Corvette-y looking, just a little bit because it's got the matching
The two pods.
Yeah, but really, really good looking.
And chrome, the whole dash is chrome, and it's heavy metal. You lower the glove box door and you could break a kneecap if you weren't careful. They were built. I mean, you know when you close the door on this car, it's solid.
You know, yeah. Have you had to re-chrome anything like the front bumper?
Every bit of chrome on this is original.
Okay, because you don't want to have to do a front bumper on this thing.
No, not on one.
Yeah, you'll.
Ford was so intense on getting the styling right on these that their regular bumper manufacturer wouldn't stamp that much steel because it's so big, the bumper grill. And they finally found a company that would make it one piece so that it would look right. It had to look right. Style was everything.
The term I liked was gentleman's hot rod.
Good term.
Yeah, I thought that
Although, to be honest, these don't handle very well in corners.
No.
They're very nose heavy. The engine got shoved forward for style, and they're a boulevard cruiser.
Yeah, my 60 liked to,
that's right,
you'd turn the wheel and then you'd kind of give it a little time and then it would do a little nosedive and then finally turn.
But you look good doing it.
That's true. A good one of these, you know, if you can find it, you can go out and get a good hardtop for $12,000 to $15,000. Make it a convertible and you quickly add at least $10,000 to that and on up.
Well, they built about just over 60,000 Thunderbirds in '59, 10,000 were convertibles. And there was a book I got back in the 70s, I still have it somewhere tucked away, but it had two interesting charts in it that I thought were really fascinating. It shows the value curve of a car, and it goes straight down to nothing at about 12 years. And then starts to come almost straight back up again. Meanwhile, how many are left? And it showed that when you reach 18 years of age, there's 0.8% or less than 1% of a car left. So I was buying these cars that I have when they were worth nothing at about 14 years of age, and there were still enough of them out there that hadn't been crushed or done away with. And like they said, you know, when a car gets old, it has no value and it needs a lot of work. So what's the sense in keeping it? Unless you think it's something special.
Yeah, your crystal ball is working properly.
It's working and shined up.
The convertible top on these, they're kind of fun to watch go down.
Well, they initially thought about, they spent a lot of time debating the convertible on this car. First of all, it's a unibody. They have to keep the strength.
And for the viewers that don't know, the unibody means there's no frame on the thing.
No frame.
It's
all, well, like an old Nash. A Nash was unibody, the Lincoln Zephyrs were. And they thought about a three-piece retractable top, like the retractable Fords. That didn't work at all. So then they thought about having a Targa T-top, which they built a prototype of. It looked really nice. Then they were going to have flaps that lifted up so you could get in easier. Someone came up, and it might have been the same man who came up with a retractable, having a retractable soft top that lifts off and folds up and goes upside down into the trunk, and then your trunk is hinged backwards like the retractable Ford. And it totally gives it such a clean look and yet you've got, you know, the best of both.
Yeah, some of the 60s had sunroofs in them.
60s had 2,100 sunroofs they made with a metal roof that cranked back, and they didn't offer it again till 67, I believe it was. But again, a good idea, but people just didn't spend the money on it.
This is a lot of car. This is a huge car, and huge. I mean, if you looked it up in the dictionary, this is it. This is a giant car.
Huge.
What do we have here, and how big is it?
This, as I call it, in the age of excess, this was excess. It's a '59 Continental Mark IV convertible, and right away, people are going to say, well, wait a minute, the Mark IV didn't come out till the '70s. When they dropped the Mark II Continental in '57, they wanted to keep the name alive. And this was a whole new car, the unibody again, and they said, let's use the Mark. So in '58 they called it a Mark III, in '59 a Mark IV, and in '60 a Mark V. Then when the 4 doors came out in '61, they went back to Lincoln Continental. And it wasn't until '69, and then they had to decide what to do. They were going to bring the Continental back again. And they just wrote these off. So I call them, and a lot of people call them, the forgotten Continental. It's 19 feet 1 inch long, weighs 5,400 pounds, runs on 950 14 tires. It's an inch longer than the biggest Ford SUV. And there's nothing subtle about it at all.
And the one thing for the viewers to remember, this is not a Lincoln Continental, this is a Continental.
Well, as the books will say when they talk about it, it's badge engineered. It's really a Lincoln, with the most unique thing is its power back window, and they put Continental name on it, but it really was just a badge.
And tell the viewers what you just told me off camera about the comment your dad made.
Oh, my dad had one of these in a 2-door hardtop, a Continental Mark III, '58. And people would say, oh, you're Lincoln. And he'd say, no, I paid $2,000 extra for the back window that goes up and down. It's a Continental.
It's a Continental. Giant car, interesting convertible top, interesting interior, very heavy, very long. What's under that hood, and what's the transmission? And
well, not only did they build the new Wixom plant to do these in unibodies, nobody before or since has ever done a unibody this big. The car kept getting heavier, so they said we need a new engine. So on top of everything else, they built this monstrous 430 cubic inch engine, which is called a wedge and block combustion chamber. The top of the block is cut at an angle. When you put the heads on it, it creates a combustion chamber inside the block. And it's, in '59, was rated at 350 horsepower with a 298 rear axle ratio through a Cruise-O-Matic. And this car, when Motor Trend tested it, only the Pontiac Tri-Power and the Plymouth Fury were faster to 60 miles an hour. This thing was unbelievable. It could take all this mass and move it down the road that fast. And it has coil springs all the way around because they were thinking of doing air suspension. And I could do a U-turn on a downtown street. This car handles so well you forget how much car you've got, and you just start driving it like it's a regular car, which is the best compliment I think you can give it.
Your T-Bird is really different and sculptured, and this is really different and sculptured, but they don't look the same. It's, you know, it's different stuff.
Rereading the articles on these cars, they had developed a way of deep stamping metal about 1955 into the late 50s. And so the sculptors went to work on this, and as the magazine article says, there's a lot of deep drawn steel on this and a lot of unique styling. The scoop effect that goes down the side, the little fins on the back but very defined, and of course the headlight shaping, it's
just a tiny, I mean, talk about a car that's a total opposite of this, but there's just a little tiny Corvette touch with that cove on the side.
I don't know what their thinking was on the cove. In the '58, it was very deep and very pronounced. On the '59, they toned it down. The headlights on the '58 were isolated from the grille. They toned that down. And they just, I don't know where they got the idea for the cove. It doesn't, to me, seem to fit that well.
And style-wise, that the back end of this shouldn't work. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it works. I mean, not mechanically, but just the style of it. It's sort of like, well, it's going the wrong way, and it's cut off, and it's blunt, but it still looks right.
It's my favorite angle of the car. I like the rear 3/4 view, showing the cut-in window, and that I think makes the whole rear end look even longer, which it doesn't, like you say, perhaps need to do.
Yeah. And the interior on these look more like they should be in a very stylish 1959 modern home living room rather than in the car.
Well, one thing they did on the interior is they continued using leather from Bridge of Weir, Scotland. And that was supposedly a better deep dye process. And as my dad said, the cows over there didn't get marks in them from barbed wire fences. But they continued to use some of the things from the Mark II. But it really does with what they call biscuits and pleating. They used a style that was in effect in your homes back then. And it is unbelievable how much room is in that car. I can make the power seat go back and tip it so much I can't reach the gas pedal.
Wow.
And I'm 6'2".
Barry, we have made a giant, I want to say leap, actually a minuscule, I guess, from a giant 59 Continental to a little itty bitty King Midget. And before you answer any questions, I think you and I fall into what a lot of the viewers fell into when I was growing up. My dad and everybody's dad had a subscription to Popular Mechanics, and every issue in the back there was an ad for a King Midget, and every boy and lots of girls from about 4 years old on just dreamed about having one of these cars. I just think they are so cool.
I was that way. It was 1959, and I was going to high school in California. Dad was in the Air Force. And he took those magazines, and I sent for the catalog, which showed this model. But at my high school, one of the kids had the earlier King Midget. And every day he would come out and have to lift the front end of the car up off the concrete stops, put it back down, and putt out of the parking lot. But at $1 a week allowance for cutting the lawn, even at $680, this wasn't going to happen. It took 35 years to find the two of them.
Yeah, you have two of them. They're so cute. Well, what's the appeal here? I know the answer to this already, but I want to get you have a car that's totally, for the most part, impractical. You don't want to be trying to go down the freeway on this car.
People ask me if I drive down the freeway.
It's limited in everything. It's probably a little bit dangerous because maybe it's just not seen. Knowing all these things, I still want one.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's got a cuteness about it that's timeless. It looks like an old Jeepster. Looks like one of the Jeepsters from the early 50s. The size, I mean, it's just unpretentious. It doesn't put on any airs. It just says, hey, look at me. I'm this little car. And it's so well made. And I think that's what impresses me about it, is how well made it is. The two men had a dream to build a little car in Athens, Ohio, and succeeded. And people come up to me. I can be my one-man car show. And they come up and they want to know about it. If I meet somebody that has even seen the ad, I think that's amazing.
The history of King Midgets, I know they originally started out basically looking like soapbox derby cars with motors in them.
Yeah, the first one.
Then they had a kind of a sporty model or whatever. Can you run us through the history?
Well, they started out, they met after World War II at a Civil Air Patrol meeting, and they decided...
They being these two guys?
Yeah, Dale Orcutt and Claude Dry. And they'd both built homemade airplanes and said, why can't you build a little commuter car that was built like a home-built airplane, very light, efficient, simple? So I said, well, that's a nice idea, but how can you do it? So they started out building a scooter that really looks pretty neat. If you ever see a picture of a King Midget scooter, they kept pocketing the money. Then they came out with this one-seater, like you're talking about, it looks like a dirt track racer. That was mostly a kit. You had to build that yourself. Then came the first two-seater, which was a little smaller than this, more rounded off, smaller engine. And this is the biggest car, the final evolution, the most complex thing they ever built. Still a one-cylinder engine. And this started being built in '57 and lasted till they went out of business in '69, which wasn't their fault. A guy bought the company in '66, and it went into bankruptcy in 3 years.
This particular car has a 12 horsepower Kohler in it, right?
Right. That was the biggest engine they ever put in them. They started putting those engines in '67, 12 horsepower, and then before that they used a Wisconsin 9-horse.
How fast will it go, and what kind of transmission does it have?
They supposedly patented, it's a 2-speed centrifugal clutch system, which surprisingly very simple, but they came up with it. In the catalog, they said it would do 55. When I was younger and dumber, I took one of them down in front of the Navy base, held the gas pedal down, and it got to 55.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, this is the dumbest thing I have ever done. If you've ever seen the cameras in the land speed record cars just before they flip over, where they're going like this.
That's what you were doing.
That's what I was doing. They're happiest around town at about 35. They love to do what a big car hates to do, stop and go, short trips, slow speeds.
My thought is that the ownership of one of these, it's a short commuter. You run to the grocery store in it, you run to the neighbor's house in it, you just have fun in it.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to pack up and make a 200-mile drive in it, though I'm sure there are people out there that do that. But what is the best use of this? Is this a smart car out of the 50s, or what?
Well, exactly what you're saying. What would kill a big car, this loves to do. Stop and go, short runs. One of the best ideas I heard is use it to service airplanes at a small municipal airfield. You can go out with a little trailer behind it, go from plane to plane, shut it off, turn it on, put around. Nothing's going to bother it. But there is they showed a photo of the guy with his King Midget, the earlier model. In the early 50s, this guy took one from Michigan to Mexico City and back over 11,000 foot high mountain range and 700 miles of desert. Didn't have a single breakdown. It cost him $44 for gas.
Wow.
So people did some bizarre things with these, way beyond what you'd imagine. But they were ahead of the time. The smart car, the whole idea of simplicity, maintain it yourself, is wonderful. What this car cost is what it costs for a diagnostic checkup today, before you even find out, you know, what your car needs.
Barry let me drive this from where he lives to our little spot here. The first thing that impressed me was it was so roomy inside. There was a lot of room in there. It was actually comfortable, and could have had my wife sitting alongside of me and we'd have been just fine. It felt like is there something beyond here, or was it all the way to the front? Because it looked like...
well, right about here is where the floor comes up, where the fender
right
line
at the back
is.
of the fenders.
And right, even with the fenders, there's a partial shelf that goes all the way to the nose. It's a little hard to get at, but you can put side curtains, coats, and whatever you want under there, and so nobody will even know it's there.
A little bit of trunk area.
But it is, anyone I've given a ride to in this just marvels at how much room there is inside.
The other one's white, looks really nice. This looks really sporty. And you say this is a stock color on this?
This was a stock color. They decided initially to do one color, and that was white. Keep everything simple. But in the 60s, people wanted colors, so they offered red, yellow, and blue. And the story goes that because now they had to mix the paint and put it in a spray gun and shoot your car, that they would charge $10 extra for the trouble. Unlike Detroit, which would offer you, what, about 50 colors, it seems, per car per year.
And a certain period of time, all 50 colors at the same time on the car.
On the car, right. My wife loves the red. I like the white one because the white one was the one I saw in the ads in the magazines, and you know.
The restoration on this, I mean, this looks like a show car. This is absolutely beautiful.
Well, it's nicer than most of them look. A lot of them were used up and thrown away. You find that they've been thrown out in the backyard somewhere. Some were just treated always as a toy, and this one obviously was. I got it from an elderly couple, and they said it had been in heated storage 10 years. The only thing bad with it was the inner tubes had rotted. And it's got the original Goodyear tires, the top's original, the Masonite dashboard. I don't even know if you can buy Masonite anymore. It's just a nice original car with one repaint on it.
What model year is this?
This one's a 67.
67.
And this is when the new owner started cranking these out instead of building them as they were getting orders. And they were storing them all over Athens, Ohio, and they ran out of money. And he did the exact opposite of what was working for over 25 years.
But he was going to make a big success out of it.
Well, supposedly at one time it was the 5th biggest car company in the United States when all of the independents were disappearing.
Yeah. Barry, thank you very much for allowing us to take a look at your collection, both large and small, very large and very small. I think we have done over 400 episodes of the show, and you have the biggest and the smallest collection we've seen.
Most at each end.
Yeah. So thanks a lot.
My pleasure, and I appreciate any publicity that the King Midget can get. that it never got when it was being built is great to see.
Yeah, and thank you very much for watching the show. I'll let you in a little secret. I'm working on a deal on owning a King Midget, so next time you see me, ask me if I actually did the deal. Thanks a lot for watching, and we will see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.